Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast of ZeldaDungeon.net, and I want to talk to you about Phantom Hourglass, which I just beat. I just beat Phantom Hourglass. So I wanted to, talk to you a little bit about what my impressions of the game were. Phantom Hourglass has a bit of a reputation as being one of the worst Zelda games ever made. And some people consider it the very single worst Zelda game ever made. And not even necessarily a good game, some people consider it, I've talked about the game, even though I hadn't played it. I've read a lot about the game and, formed my opinion of what I've heard of other people say about it. And I've talked a lot about it. I've talked a lot about things in the series that I want or don't want, and that Phantom Hourglass has or doesn't have these things. So now that I've actually played the game, my own opinion of it surprises me. I actually love Phantom Hourglass. I think it's one of my favorite games in the whole series, enough to go into my top 5. And that shocks me, and I'm sure you guys are like, what? And then some of you just quit watching the video. And that makes me sad, but I'm going to carry on anyway. I'm going to go talk about a couple things about how I thought about the game. There's this sailing, Wind Waker had that sailing where, you're just going along, taking your time, just, sit back, maybe have a sip of your drink, except you can't, because then you're steering, and then the Georgs, little shark guys, come to get you. So, a lot of people like the sailing in Wind Waker. My issues with it, I liked it, but I had issues with it, and they were that it wasn't very polished, There wasn't a lot for you to do other than just sit there and sail. The distance you had to cross was kind of too long, in my opinion. Even though there was a lot of stuff to do out there, you still had to take a while sailing to it. And there wasn't enough time spent on land. There was these tiny islands with no time walking around, really. And then you're sailing most of the time. 60% of the game, maybe, was just sailing. So what I feel about Phantom Hourglass's sailing is, obviously the reason it had the sailing is because it was a sequel to the Wind Waker. However, my opinion is that the reason they changed how the sailing worked is because some people didn't like the sailing in the Wind Waker. And I feel that the sailing was improved in Phantom Hourglass because, there's less of a sea for you to cross. So, immediately a lot of that irritation of just sitting there and doing nothing is, diminished. Then you've got the fact that the islands are fewer, but they're bigger, so it's more like a land area than these self-contained little rooms, you know what I mean? And I like that a bit better, and it feels like they had enough for you to do on the sea in Phantom Hourglass to make it a little more interesting. You could stop and fish, stop on boats, if you just wanted to go straight from point A to point B, there wasn't much time spent doing so, you know what I mean. Now, some people disagree, so I guess it chalks up to opinion, but I thought the sailing in Phantom Hourglass was a significant improvement, and I realized you might not have that opinion unless you didn't like the sailing in Wind Waker, or at least felt it could be improved. Now, of course, there's a difficulty. You hear me all the time complain about, this game's too easy, come on, make it this or that hard, give it a hard setting or whatever, I'm always complaining about the games being too easy, but, some of my favorite games are the most recent handheld titles like The Minish Cap and Phantom Hourglass, and those are widely identified as easy games. Now, what's weird for me is I didn't find them terribly easy. Maybe it's because of the nature of the handheld games that you actually generally have to be slightly more cautious, and I'm an aggressive freaking gamer, so I just run in and get myself killed. I don't know if that's just me imagining that, but either way, I've actually had some trouble. It's weird, some people have an easy time with this, but a hard time with that, whereas the other person will be the opposite. I've had that experience with the handheld titles. I don't know what it is. But I'll still admit it was a pretty easy game, especially the bosses. They were pretty... Except maybe Gleeok, or, that guy, the big two-headed dragon. That one was a little tricky for me, at least. The thing about the game is that, well, I felt it was very, very easy. It was actually kind of creative. A lot of the bosses, while simple and easy as hell once you figure them out, had inventive, cute little ideas. Come on. Crake, the Bane of Courage, that crab guy. Come on, that was cool that you just saw out of his point of view and you had to shoot where, he saw you, That was cool stuff. And I liked the creativeness of that and just the general dungeon design. I think some of the creative ideas they came up with, like drawing with the map, some of the puzzles they did with that were actually sort of annoying to me. Like most of the Temple of Courage actually annoyed me. But I love drawing on the map. I love the creativeness. I kind of look at Phantom Hourglass a bit like it is a 2D game. I mean, I don't think you can really say it was a 3D game, even though it had 3D graphics. Gameplay-wise, it was a 2D plane, except maybe the sailing stuff. But that's like a different gameplay component anyway, so if you know what I mean. Then there's like the story. I thought the story was actually really good. Some people talk about having a duller story, but I was like talking to Mossies, and he was pointing out that like I forget what he was saying, so maybe I shouldn't be quoting him. But the story really had a lot going on in it. You wake up on Merkay Island, and you meet Ciela, and then you're talking to Oshus, and you have no idea what's going on, and he doesn't even tell you. He's not helping you at first. There's this evolution with the characters, and like you go off on the first portion of the quest, which they always have. That's not too inventive, but it's like things really change the second time around, and then there's the whole evolution of Linebeck's character. I just thought, the story was actually pretty good, and I thought it made me a little emotional. I loved Linebeck's character evolution, the interactions between him and Ciela, and even Jolene and Oshus. I actually started feeling for some of the characters, and that doesn't usually happen to me, even in Zelda games, Maybe in Majora's Mask, but that was about it. Okay, then there's like the music. Excuse me. A lot of people identify this game as not having a very good soundtrack, and I've even backed this up, banking on that. After playing the game, I feel that the soundtrack was a little dull. I mean, there's a lot of points where the same music plays in all the dungeons and in all the boss battles, except for like Bellum. So, and a lot of the songs, they didn't stand out to me. They weren't, like anything that really made you think, whoa, that's cool, I've never heard anything like that before, except for a few songs like Linebeck's theme or the Bellum battle themes, But, I think that still, the soundtrack worked and it was good. It just wasn't the kind of revolutionary, really stands out to you stuff that we're used to in the Zelda series. But I think that was okay. I mean, you can't keep that up forever. That's kind of a ridiculous expectation sometimes. And I thought it actually had some brilliant themes that I'll remember forever, like the Bellum battle theme. I love that theme. It's awesome. The design of the game, as I've mentioned, I felt it was really creative and interesting. There's a lot of moments where you have to do things that are a little out of the ordinary, at least for the Zelda series, and I just thought it was a creative use of the gameplay style, I don't know, I think the game deserves points for being unique, and I think it really got a lot of that done. I've also heard people say the game was boring, and I can agree with that. It has a bit of a boring feel. I can see how people found it boring. I just didn't. I don't know why, but I was enthralled. I'm a bit at a loss to explain it. Even though I'm making all these points, I don't quite get how they come together, I'm still a little confused, especially since I'm almost contradicting myself. Another thing about the game is that the side quests and the collectibles were actually pretty great. I loved what were they called? The power, courage, and wisdom gems. Those were cool items, and they gave you all those little powers that you could activate. I thought that was a neat idea, and it was a great collectible. You just find them all over the place. There are 20 of them, 20 of each of them, and they're pretty easy to find. But it was a great collectible. And I thought like the ship parts, though randomized, were pretty interesting. And then they had the heart containers, which admittedly I didn't like that they weren't heart pieces. But it's not a major deal. And I just thought the game really made you want to go around. And they had good mini-games. I love it when the mini-games are good. Twilight Princess is another game that had good mini-games. I love it when the mini-games are cool and they give you good prizes and they make you really want to play them. Okay, last point. Temple of the Ocean King. Alright. I know a lot of people were annoyed at this. And I actually, going through it, I can totally see where you guys are coming from. Especially like halfway through the game and the swift, like the red phantoms that move faster, the swift phantoms, they start appearing. That dungeon does start to get a little irritating. However, I felt it was a good aspect to the game's. It was brilliantly designed, in my opinion. It's this area you have to keep going through, and you're unlocking new routes and new items to get there. And it's just like deeply tied to the rest of the game. It's a central dungeon, and it was just so much depth to the level design. I don't think any other dungeon in the series had that concept. That didn't have that concept, had that depth to the design. And having not played Spirit Tracks, I'm going to be careful not to contradict myself later on. From what I understand, the Tower of Spirits, it doesn't really quite do that as much, where you have to go through the old areas again, and there's new depth to how you explore and get new items and get new shortcuts, and it's just speed runs and stuff. There's just this unique fun way to get through the dungeon, and as you go through the game, there's just more depth, and it was just so well designed. I just thought that was great, and I don't know. I feel that the Temple Ocean King doesn't get enough love, and I kind of feel Phantom Hourglass is underrated. I mean, it's a handheld game. It's gonna be less in there, less content than other games. But I think it really worked well with what it had. Now, it's very different from the rest of the series in a lot of ways, and because of that, I think, if something's different, some people aren't gonna like it. That's just period, So it makes sense. And also, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like a change of the Wind Waker for some people who didn't like Wind Waker, at least with the sailing. And, a lot of people liked Wind Waker, so I think that's why, I'm not knocking what people think about the game. I just loved it, and I think it deserves more of a chance than it gets. Alright, guys, that's all I gotta say. Tell me what you think in the comments, and, later, guys.